I'm an encourager at heart, and I also have a very unique gift for honing in pretty quickly on people's unique gifts and talents. I've actually gotten off calls that have been discovery calls in the first 15 minutes, and I've been able to reflect back to them some things that I noticed or I picked up on in our interaction. And the comments have been, wow, how did you know that about me? Or were you able to discern that?
Hey, beautiful humans. Welcome to the Bold Women in Business podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Honeyman, founder of Honeybee Bold and fellow bold woman in business. This show is all about highlighting women who are changing the world, helping other women, and kicking ass along the way. Let's dive in. Hi, today I am so excited to welcome Ruth Smith onto the podcast. She is a tech leader who has founded multiple companies, worn many hats, and has been in the tech space, I think, since like the dot-com boom in the 90s. Is that accurate?
Yes,
Okay, yes.
absolutely.
You've seen it all. You've
Yeah.
seen it all. And so she's now building on her experience as a seasoned leader and helping others build meaningful and rewarding careers. So, Ruth, how did you go from tech leader to career coach? I'd love to hear that transition.
Well, indirectly, I've been helping people in careers most of my career. I think it started officially in 2010 when there was an economic downturn. And through my church, one of the pastors had approached me because I had had a lot of experience as a hiring manager. And there were a lot of layoffs that occurred during that recession. And there were a lot of people who lost their jobs. And so they were trying to stand up a career transition group to offer support to these people. And I found myself leading that group. And I had previously had experience on LinkedIn. I've been on LinkedIn since 2006. I had experience, reviewing, helping people with the resumes and interviewing, those types of basic skills. So I found myself in that volunteer role, and I thought it would last maybe a few months, but it ended up lasting 4 years. It was a
Wow.
long recession for people to come out of. And so I met so many amazing people in that journey. Many of them I consider close friends today. I still get outreaches from them about helping them in a really difficult time in their lives and career. And so that has sort of been a passion of mine, and it's a way for me to give back to other people. And so it's something that I've done on the side most of my career. When I was recently laid off, I was talking to another friend. I had met with his daughter who was looking to pivot out of teaching and get into a project management role. And I met with her several times and helped her make that pivot. And he said to me when I lost my job, if you could figure out a way to help other people do what you did for my daughter, you would have a line at your door. And
Yeah.
so I decided to start it as a side hustle and continue helping people in their career transition journey.
That's incredible. And I think especially with everything going on right now with the economy, and it's just such a weird time to be on the job market. And I think that it's something that is so valuable and so needed. So many people are kind of going through these, not even just through layoffs, but kind of just in general. I don't know if you had this experience or if you kind of feel this way, but I feel like COVID was a big turning point for so many people where it was this opportunity to really evaluate, take a step back and is this how I want to be living my life? Is this what I want to be doing with my career? And then add layoffs on top of that. And you have just so many people who are really in that transition phase and really going through that kind of almost existential crisis. So it's something that so many people really need someone to coach them through, because we aren't trained to do that, right? We aren't trained to do
Right.
that ourselves.
Well, so much, as you point out, has happened since COVID hit. I mean, that's unprecedented. And in some ways, looking back, it feels like it was a decade ago. And really, it was only just 3 or 4 years. But I think going through COVID really turned careers on their head. And it did make people evaluate what was important. If you remember, we went through the whole, quitting phase. people were leaving their
Mm,
jobs in droves and really evaluating what's important. And I see a huge difference in my generation and even Gen XYZ. They want different things and they are willing to ask for that and reach for that now for themselves. And so I think it's really changed our job market and the way we look at our careers. And the idea of longevity is behind us because there's not loyalty to companies anymore.
absolutely. Absolutely. And it's such a shame, but that is the
Yeah.
reality. And I think that probably
Mhm.
you're in the same boat as me where so many of us wind up getting steered towards entrepreneurship partially because of that, right? Because we say
Mhm.
we really want to have control over our own destiny and, really kind of make those choices very intentionally versus having those choices made for us.
Right, right. I recall, earlier in my career, especially when I was a young mother, I mean, it was just unheard of to work remotely. And it was so difficult and challenging to, get yourself ready and your kids ready to get out the door and drop them at daycare. And there was just this hustle and this grind that was so stressful that I feel like for a number of reasons, people are trying to take back their time and how they see themselves. They want to work hard, they want to earn, they want to be passionate about what they do, but they want to do it in their time and their way. And I think was why we're seeing so many people become solopreneurs. I read, an article this week from Bankrate that said there are roughly 26% of people have a side hustle today. Some obviously are doing it to earn extra income. Some need it to make ends meet, but some are using that as a launching pad for, eventually going out on their own. And look at the
Yeah.
rise of digital nomads that's happened in the past 4 years. We can work remotely and we can work from anywhere and do really great work. And so I think this generation is defining what the workplace is going to look like of the future.
Yeah, and when we chatted not too long ago, a few weeks ago,
Mhm.
I was so taken aback or so impressed because I always say I've been working remotely since before it was cool, since
Mhm.
2012, and then you just totally knocked me down a peg because I think you said 2003 is when you started
Mhm.
working remotely, right?
Yeah.
Um, which is
Mhm.
incredible, really incredible. That was long before this was even a glimmer on people's radars. So
Well, I'm thankful at the time it was a company that would let me, and they gave me great flexibility. I still went into the office, but I had some rules. I wouldn't take the role unless I could work it around my kids' schedule. I wanted to be there when they came home from school. I, wanted to be there to welcome them and have that quality time. And
yeah,
they told me at that time, they said, "We don't care where you work as long as you're productive and if your numbers are great, then we're never going to have a complaint about this." And so I was so nervous for the first 6 months of that, thinking, okay, they're going to totally change their mind. They're going to pull back the curtain. They're not going to let me do this. But they did not change their mind.
that's
They
incredible.
continued to support me in that. And so I'm thankful for that and for those leaders who believed in me and believed in me enough to let me have the flexibility to produce at my peak times when I
Yeah,
could work my schedule around it.
yeah, that's incredible. Obviously, at that time, you were working for someone else, and you
Mhm,
you had that kind of arrangement. But
mhm,
most of the listeners of this
mhm,
podcast are female entrepreneurs, right? Women running their own
mhm,
businesses, but I think that the struggle of kind of juggling whether it's motherhood or other home responsibilities
mhm.
or many other parts of just being a woman, right? We are
Right.
juggling a lot, and so I'd love to hear your wisdom on kind of I don't love the when people ask women, right, all the time, like, how do you juggle it all, how do you manage everything, how do you find balance, right? No one's asking men those questions. So
No,
um,
that's true.
but I think that there are
Mhm,
realities to whether you're running a business or working for
mhm,
someone else. If you really care about your career and you have all these other responsibilities, you went through it in a really significant way. You were an
mhm.
executive, you were doing this, even if you weren't necessarily an entrepreneur at the time. But I would love to hear kind of thoughts on, for lack of a better way of phrasing this question, how to balance it all.
Well, first of all, being perfectly balanced, I think, is a fallacy. It's a lot of hard work, and
Yeah.
you have to figure out what works for you and your family or your situation. I think one, knowing what that is and asking for it is a starting point. I think as women, we're often trained to not ask for what we need to be effective. And I had to learn that the hard way, advocate for myself. And regardless of how we look at it, I feel like there's a huge burden that falls on women in terms of managing our households
True.
and our families if we have children, but even if we're married or we have a significant other, there's always a balancing time for our relationships and things. And we have to balance all that. It's like having a lot of plates spinning in the air. And I shared with someone on a post the other day that I've always felt like if you wanted to get something done, you needed to hire a busy mom to do it because I mean women have are just really stellar at multitasking and knowing when they're at their prime in terms of like peak hours and trying to carve out, times for dedicated work, times for focusing on family, times for focusing on our health and our personal side. So I've had to figure that out throughout life. It wasn't like I had a magic answer or this, crystal ball that I could look into and go, this is how you map out a perfect, easy life in terms of balance. But I can
Yeah.
remember like trying to work out and take care of my health. And I had not done that in a long time. And I figured out that the only time I could do it was before my kids got up in the morning. So I started
Oh,
this habit of going to the gym at 5 in the morning. I still have that same habit 15 years later because
that's incredible.
that worked for me because that was the only time my household was asleep and uninterrupted. I'm not in a household full of morning people. I will say that. So that works to my advantage because I'm a morning person. But, for others, they're night owls and they do that. I think it's important to figure out what your peak performance hours are because if you can work and do dedicated focused tasks during those times and really carve that out without interruption, then I feel like you are so much more effective at getting things done. And then being able to layer in your day and map that out, it's not easy, but you have to be master of your own schedule. And
Yeah.
learning to do that is really an art form. But that's the thing that's kind of worked for me. And it's adjusted at every stage of life. Just when you think you've got it kind of figured out, then you land a new client or you move or your spouse or significant other has a major change to their career and you have to constantly adapt and adjust. So I think it's an evolution and you have to, work hard individually to master that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we all have our reasons for starting a business. As
Mhm.
we just talked about,
Yeah.
some people get pushed
Hmm.
into it and some people
Hmm.
choose it for different reasons. But when it comes to your coaching business, what really lights you up the most? Like what's kind of the thing that keeps you going?
Well, I've always felt like our careers, and especially as it's tied to money, it's fundamental in our existence to be able to provide for ourselves. That's the one necessity that we have, throughout life is to find a way to make money so that we can take care of ourselves and our families. So it's very core. And I think looking at that core, it's really important to find things that you're passionate about that you're really motivated to do and enjoy. The other aspect of it is I get a lot of satisfaction from helping people find that perfect fit or that career or that opportunity that they love. And oftentimes it's not just the physical work, but most of the time it's a culture, an environment, it's a job or something that gives them a lot of satisfaction.
For sure.
And that's so rewarding to me to see people take light. I work with a lot of people they're really struggling. They're either in the wrong type of role or they're in the wrong type culture or their self-esteem is struggling for some reason. And it gives me a lot of joy to be able to have people look at themselves and see all the gifts and talents that they have and being able to use those and see their worth and their value. That makes my heart warm. And I love seeing people move on and thrive in whatever they decide to do in their lives. So there's a lot of reward for it for
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, we spend so much of our time working, right?
Yeah.
Most of us, that's what we spend
Yeah.
most of our time
Yeah.
doing. I always say this when I see, some of my friends unfortunately are
Hmm.
working in jobs that they hate, and
Yeah.
there is that culture that I think I think as a society we are starting to overcome, right? Like
Hmm.
as you said, the newer generations looking for something different, but I think that there
Hmm.
is still kind of a little bit, my age and
Yeah.
older, of people who really still have that expectation that like, you hate your job and that's just what you do, right?
Hmm.
You show up and you do the job that you hate, and that's okay. But I think that there is more and more of a shift towards understanding that your job is so much more than just a job, and it's such a core part of who you are. And so if you can be spending that time doing something that's really meaningful to you and valuable to you, and when obviously when I talk to female entrepreneurs who are running
Hmm.
businesses, and like my whole approach to branding is very values based, and the
Hmm.
reason for that is because I really want my clients to understand that when they build a business that is a perfect reflection of their inner values and what they care about and what's meaningful to them, that's going to wind up, first of all, just fueling them to do their best work,
Hmm.
but also it's going to wind up connecting with their clients in a way that they really can't if they're just kind of like, here's the product that I'm selling, right? So
Right.
I
Right.
think the same really
Hmm.
holds true whether you're working for someone else or you're running your own business, just making sure that that effort that you're putting in is really aligned with what lights you up, right? With what
Right.
makes you really proud and gives you meaning.
Right. Agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
So what is your magic or your superpower when it comes to coaching your clients? How's your approach different?
Well, number one, I know innately I have this unique gift, and it's encouragement. And I'm an encourager at heart, and I also have a very unique gift for honing in pretty quickly on people's unique gifts and talents. I've actually gotten off calls that have been discovery calls in the first 15 minutes, and I've been able to reflect back to them some things that I noticed or I picked up on in our interaction. And the comments have been, wow, how did you know that about me? Or were you able to discern that? So, first of all, being able to see the other person and to see strengths and abilities that maybe they didn't know they had or they didn't believe they had, and bring
Mm,
those out first. And then I find that there are, obviously several key points that we hit in the career journey. Everybody is at a different point in terms of, where they are with their resume and their LinkedIn profile, honing in on the type of job or career they're looking for. What I find most often is people need a strategy. They've kind of like, yeah, I've got my resume, and their resumes aren't bad. We, maybe tweak a few things and we make a few updates to their LinkedIn profile, but I just find that people don't know how to go about finding companies and a job, and they don't know how to research them and how to navigate that process. So I often find myself in that capacity, kind of leading them, and I'm teaching them research skills, bringing to light maybe some companies they've never heard of or thought about. Own my own company twice. So sometimes it's, giving them the courage to step out and maybe start their own thing. And
oh,
we have to think of a strategy that they may go cold turkey and start that business, but they may have to take on a part-time job while they get their business going. Or maybe they're going to start it as a side hustle and keep their full-time. And how do they balance those things out? So a
yeah.
lot of it is just looking at their individual desires and goals. And I have a list of all the core things from, interviewing, as I said, looking at LinkedIn. I find people really struggle with how to negotiate when it comes
Mm,
down to getting offers and how to negotiate that. Because people are like, there's part of them in this economy that they're just, well, I ought to be thankful to have a job because I've been looking for a while. But I'm like, don't settle. Like, I know it's
right.
taking you a while, but so sometimes just giving them the courage and the strength and the permission to ask for what
Yeah.
they're worth.
And I'm
So,
sure that the research and like kind of
mhm.
uh getting people more familiar with the different types of companies is a big
Mhm.
part of that, right? Because if you have
Mhm.
a company that is venture backed, for
Right.
instance,
Yes.
they're going to say that they have a certain budget, but they have
Mm-hmm.
more money than they always have
They
more
do.
money than
Right.
than they're
Yes.
saying, right?
True. Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I've worked for Fortune 500 companies in my career and I've worked for 4 high growth startups.
Mm,
So I know both sides of that coin and there's pros and cons to both. But yeah, a lot of the startups have been very well funded. And one of the things I tell some of my clients is that, I feel like the Fortune 500 companies sometimes provide stability. They look better on your resume, but I'm always I've been able to 10x my experience by working for startups because you get to wear so many hats and you're given so many responsibilities that the growth,
yeah.
career wise is really amazing. So, you just got to pick your heart and, what your goal is individually.
Yeah, I always planned to go out on my own,
Hmm.
and I was just looking for the right time, the right opportunity. And there was a point at which I was just doing freelance writing
Hmm.
full time for 4 months between jobs. And that was kind of this point where I said, this when I'm going to start building a business? Like I'm just
Right.
freelancing, but am I
Hmm.
doing this for real? And then an opportunity came up at a startup called Row. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're pretty big health
Hmm.
tech startup. And an opportunity came up. I had been freelancing for them actually, and I said, you know what? I think I'm missing specific skills and
Hmm.
specific experience that I need to feel really confident to start my own business. And so I took that job. I was there for a year and 8 months. And it was like the most educational experience I could have had. And it was just like the fastest way to gain those skills that I needed. And when it came time, I said, you know what? I feel like I've gained those skills. I've filled in
Hmm.
those gaps. And like, it's time. I'm ready to move. I'm ready to start my own
Wow.
business.
Hmm.
And I talked to a lot of newer freelancers actually, who ask me kind of, well, how did you do this? Right. And I say, well, first of all, this is built on 15, 16 years of experience. It's
Right.
not like I just woke up, you know, and said, I
Mhm.
want to be a freelancer, right?
Yeah.
This is built on a lot of experience, but I think also just being really intentional. And I think what you're talking about is really related to this is like deciding what are your goals? What's your path? How do you want to kind of build the career or the business or
Right.
whatever it is that you want to do? And then taking those steps really intentionally to make sure that you can get there. And so I think that a lot of people don't realize how much intentional work goes
Mhm.
into building a successful business or building a successful career or right, like
Mhm.
a lot of people I think are still kind of operating under this assumption that it kind of just happens, right? Like
Mhm.
it's who you know, right? That's one of the things
Right.
that people say,
Mhm.
it's who you know. And yes, connections mean the world, right?
Right.
But a lot of it really does come down to taking very intentional steps. At least that's been my experience.
Right. You said something that's really interesting. And I think it's true. And, when you took the job at the startup, you said there are some things that I still need to learn in order to feel comfortable launching my own business. So you were very intentional about evaluating your overall skills and you had a goal to gain certain skills before you made your exit. So I think it's always important to evaluate our strengths and weaknesses. We need to think about what is my goal and where are the gaps that I need to fill before I can get there. Again, some people it happens quickly. And again, I'm a big believer in networking and opportunity knocking at your door, but I also
Mhm.
believe there's a lot of preparation that
Yeah.
happens behind the scenes. We can't be accidental about our careers and we have to be intentional. So, highlighted something I think that's really key is to know where we need to improve and the skills gap that we need to close before we move into our dream role.
Yeah. And that's, I think, probably where a coach can really come in
Mhm.
handy is like
Mhm.
sometimes we can't see those things and it takes an outside
Mhm.
party to
Mhm.
really kind of look at the whole situation, get to know
Mhm.
you and help you really discover what it is that maybe you
Mhm.
don't see where those gaps are, or maybe
Mhm.
you can't really define what your dream role is. And so that's where really a coach can be very, very beneficial.
Oh, totally. I believe in that. And, I've had coaching, throughout my career, everything from business coaches to, mentorships. But I've also had a lot of people that have started the kinds of businesses and I've sought advice from them. But, investing in yourself does not have to be super expensive. And I think it's the best investment that I've made in myself to learn from other people who
Mhm.
were, maybe a few rungs ahead of me on the ladder or had some objectivity to be able to, evaluate my thought process and give me clarity. So I feel like right now, especially in this job market, career coaches are so important because a lot of people are doing the same things that maybe worked 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. And this is not the same economy. I honestly
Yeah.
have not seen a job market like this in my entire 30 years. I
Yeah.
have working. It's really, really different. And I think a lot of people are growing discouraged because they're trying the same old things
For
and they aren't
sure.
working. So oftentimes, getting a coach will help you get unstuck. And again, it doesn't have to be super expensive. It doesn't have to be a lifetime commitment to getting it, but it should be enough to help you get your career moving. And oftentimes you more than make up for that in the job raise that you get, with
Yeah.
changing.
Yeah, that's so true. That's
Mhm.
so true. I actually have a friend right now who is looking
Mhm.
to switch jobs. She's been at the same place for 10 years and she is facing a very big surprise. She didn't expect how different the market would
Mhm.
be looking
Yeah.
now versus 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But I told her, you got to be prepared. It's a challenging market, but I think that, taking those like intentional steps and,
Mhm.
working with a coach as needed or really kind of getting an understanding of how to approach this
Right.
market is so key. What three words come to mind
Mm.
when you think about your core identity pillars as a coach?
Or
Like
identity pillars.
what
That's a
what do
great question.
you what do you stand for? What kind of identifies you?
Well, I'm number one, a connector. I love to be able to bond and connect with people immediately. I'm so fascinated by human beings and I feel like everybody's unique and has something really special to offer. I think experience. I think I've had such a long career already and I've learned so much ins and outs. The other thing that's really, I think, different for me is I tell people I've had almost 1,000 hires in my career. And
Wow.
that's been as a hiring manager. That's been, through my owning my staffing company business and helping all of those clients. And so I've operated from both sides of the desk, meaning I can look at it from a recruiting agency viewpoint, but also know as a hiring manager, what does a great employee look like to me and what
True.
attributes would I look for? So I feel like I'm able to bring that experience perspective to people who need career coaching that a lot of people maybe have only looked through a single lens in their career. And so I think that makes me really interesting. And as much as I can help people in any career, I have spent 30 years in the tech community. I started as a software engineer. I've been a product manager, but I've also held many leadership roles from VP of client delivery, but I've also led, multiple software engineering teams. I've been at the executive level and led a really large engineering organization. And so I really think in tech and I understand that industry really well. So I think those are things that make me a little unique is the tech. I think a connector and also just understanding both sides of the table and the coin when it comes to job searching.
Yeah. If you could describe your
Mhm.
dream client, your ideal
Mhm.
client, is it someone who's working in tech and making a transition, or do you have a different kind of persona of like who you typically work with?
Well, that's interesting because I actually have both. I work with both, and I have a lot of people that I love working with people that are trying to get to middle management or middle management trying to get into executive leadership. And
Mm,
I've made that journey and I've made those steps and those hops. And so I love working with them, to help them get to that next level or that next opportunity in their career to feel like they're really growing. I also have a lot of passion for people that are maybe younger in their career and they're looking to make that first hop, post college, and maybe they found themselves in a role that they're not excited about or a career they chose that now they're beginning to question.
right.
And it's okay to make that pivot. And I find that people are really motivated in both of those situations and they take the advice. They aren't coming to me going, find me a job. I'm desperate, but it's like, I really want to invest in myself. Can you help me figure out a strategy to help me get to that next level? Or can I get into that executive C-suite role? Or can I find
Mhm.
that job that I'm really excited about? Because what I've been doing for the past, 3, 5 years does not excite me. When people are motivated, it actually motivates me to want to help them.
Yeah, and it sounds like kind of what those two audiences really have in
Mhm.
common, even though they're at different stages in their careers,
Mhm.
that like they're looking for something more, right? They're
Yes.
looking for something bigger, and it's not just about like more money, right? It sounds
Right.
like they're looking
Mhm.
for something that really does connect with their like what they want from life, right? And something
Right.
that's much more
Mhm.
meaningful and
Mhm.
purposeful. And so I
Right.
think that would motivate me too, right?
Yeah.
Is working with people who have that kind of
Mhm.
that drive.
Right.
That's great. This is always my favorite question. You are so clearly very passionate about what you do, and you love helping people with their careers. If money were no object, right?
Mhm.
Tomorrow you got a cash infusion of
Mhm.
$5 million. Is there anything you would be doing differently in building your business or how you approach your business?
Well, I think I would obviously have more systems in place. And I think as you grow and scale a company, when do you make that decision to bring on additional help
Hmm.
to help you scale and grow so you can focus on the things that you do best? I have grown and scaled two other companies. And so it's that decision. When do you hire the first employee to help you? What does that,
Yeah.
person look like? I always think I just at my core, there's no amount of money that could, take away from my joy of helping other people in that process. But as a side hat, I've always enjoyed real estate as well. And so we have some real estate holdings, and my husband and I throughout our lives have flipped and have remodeled a number of properties. And so
Oh wow.
I'm really passionate about that. So, there's always, I could always use more money to help me, do sort of my other side hustle, which is another passion that I love is renovating properties. So we're in the process now of renovating a 1970 A-frame that we bought during the pandemic. And so
Oh
we're very
wow.
excited about it and kind of the things that we're getting to do.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And
Mhm.
I am like such a big believer in obviously having like multiple
Mhm.
income streams is
Yes.
great, but I
Yeah.
think also just having multiple areas where you can kind of invest your passion
Mhm.
is really important. And it's such a beneficial thing for
Mhm.
I don't know, for our souls. I think that we
Right.
we need we need more than one place
Mhm.
to put our passion. I love
Definitely.
that. So Ruth, where can people find you?
Well, foremost, LinkedIn, you can check out my featured section. And I, have free strategy calls for anybody who might be looking for a career coach or maybe just some advice or help in that. And LinkedIn is the only platform that I'm on. So check me out there. I've enjoyed it so much. And I can't believe, LinkedIn is over 20 billion users now. It's like a
I
massive
know.
platform and it's the fastest growing. And so that's really where I've leveraged all of my efforts. And that's where I met you
Yeah.
through LinkedIn connections. So yeah, that's the best place to find me.
Yeah, LinkedIn is a magical
Mm-hmm.
place. I think
Mm-hmm.
that it sometimes gets a bad rap from some people who
Yeah.
are, tend to hang out on some other
Mm-hmm.
platforms, but I think that
Mm-hmm.
it's actually really been one of the
Yeah.
best platforms for me for like making
Yeah.
these deep connections. So, yeah, so
Absolutely.
I'll link to your page in the show notes, and I just so appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. You've had such an incredible career, and it's just wonderful to see you helping others with their careers now too.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel. I've enjoyed being part of your podcast today.
All right, beautiful humans, that's it for today's episode. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Bold Women in Business podcast, hosted by yours truly, Rachel Honeyman, with music by Shmookalele. This show is brought to you by my company, Honey Be Bold, where we build bold, unstoppable brands and websites for kick-ass women in business. If you are a female entrepreneur or dream of being one, and you want to take your business to a level that no one can resist, reach out to me at hey@honeybebold.com for a free vibe check. Honey, be bold. See you next time.